Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be making this super simple dice roller app. This is going to be an app that when you click the button, it returns two different numbers at random between 1 and 6, and then we'll have a button here that clears. Alright, so let's jump right into it. So the first thing we're going to check out here is our HTML file. I already have this set up, and this will be in the GitHub, so you can either just copy this or you can copy the repo that I have on my GitHub and you can use this. I'm not going to get in too much here into HTML structure or anything like that, but this is what we're working with. We have an H2, which is just a title for our dice roller app. We have a paragraph here, which is just some instructions of how to use the app. We have a button ID of my button with roll me. So that's going to be the button that we actually connect to our random number generator. And then we have our clear button. And then we have a div ID called roll call. And this is where we'll be sending whichever two random numbers we get back into this div. And then I actually have main.js set up here just so I could show you how the app works. But we're going to actually change it to dice roller and go ahead and save that. All right, so let's jump into the JavaScript here. So I wrote out a little to-do list of things that we're going to need to add. First is the title, which I believe we already have there. Directions, which we have there, so that's good. We're going to need to put a place that says click to roll, so that is our button here. And we're going to have a place to render whichever items we get back, the two random numbers, so that is the roll call div here. And a function that returns the two random numbers between 1 and 6, and then we get into a button that clears the dice, and obviously a function that goes along with that. And I just realized I have two number 5s here, so let's make that 6. So the first thing we want to do, actually, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to connect the button for the dice roller. So we're going to do that by starting a const here called my button, and we're going to do document.querySelector, and what we're going to target here is my button. Oops. Which, if I remember correctly, is this ID right here. So we're going to go ahead and save that. And then we're going to do what's called render to the DOM, and this will allow us to take whatever piece of information, be able to select one of the div elements, which is going to be this div right here called roll call, and we'll be able to put whatever HTML elements or anything like that, basically our two returned random numbers and a message, into this div. So we're going to call it const render to DOM. And what it's going to take in is a div ID. So that would be, in this case, roll call. So div ID, and then it's going to take in the HTML that we want to render into that div. So we're going to do a fat arrow, and we're going to open up our function here. So now we have to tell it what to do. So we're going to take our selected div, and that is going to be targeting our document.querySelector. Oops. And that is going to be whichever div ID we want to put in there. Oops. Div ID. So now we want to take that selected div, and we want to target its inner HTML. And we're going to set that HTML to whatever HTML we want to render in there, which will be our two return numbers and a message. So now we have this function set up here that we're going to be able to take whichever HTML that we want, and we're going to put it in to whichever div element, which will be roll call here. So let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so now we can start working on our random math button, basically. So how we're going to do that is we're going to target my button here. We're going to add an event listener, And what that event listener is listening for is going to be a click. Oops. It's going to be a click. And then it's going to listen for whatever functions that we put in here. So now that we have this event listener fixed here, I'm actually going to create a new const called roller. And this is what's going to store all of our returned random values back. So I'm going to start a new function here. Okay, so now that we have a new function set here called roller, this is where we're going to keep our two random math functions, and now also where we're going to return a message that the user will see and will make sense to them. So how we're going to start this is we're going to use something called Math.floor and Math.random. So the first one we're going to do is random number 1, and we're going to put Math.floor, Math.random. For a very simple explanation about what Math.floor, Math.random are doing here is they're just returning any random whole number. So anything 0, 1, 2, 3 up to basically infinite. So after our Math.floor, Math.random, we're actually going to multiply that by 6 because that is the cap that we want to return. So instead of returning infinite numbers, we only want it to return from 0 to 6. But actually we want to return from 1 to 6. To set that, we're going to add a 1 at the end here, which will, instead of being at 0 in the beginning, it starts as 1. And then it will multiply by 6 of the random number and return something between 1 and 6. So now we're just going to do the same exact thing for our random number 2. So now we have those two functions set. And now we want to create a function that will take both of our random number functions and return a message that actually makes sense to our user. So I'm going to use string interpolation here, and I'm going to say you rolled, and this is where I'm going to put my first random number function, and I'm going to say and this is where I'm going to put in my second number function, random number function. And that will be it. So now we just want to return the roll message. And so our roller now, our roller function is going to return this entire roll message here. So the next thing we want to do is make sure that when we click this button and we return the two numbers, that it's actually rendering this message onto the DOM. So this is where we're going to do our render to DOM, and we're going to put in the div ID of roll call. I believe that's what it's called. Let's double check that. Roll call, correct. And now we're going to put in our roller function. So now when we click this My button, there's an event listener listening to click. It's going to trigger this function, which is going to return two random numbers and this message here. And we're rendering that message to the DOM to the div ID called roll call. Okay, so now that we have all this set up, our app should actually work. We don't have a clear button yet, which we'll get into in a minute, but we should check first if our app is even working. So let's go over to our web page and see how it's working. So when we click roll me, we should return you rolled and then a random number between 1 and 6, or two random numbers between 1 and 6. Cool, so it seems to be working. We're not getting any crazy repeating numbers or infinite loops or anything like that. Our message is returning right clearly to the div, and it's working. Our clear button is not working, but that's a super simple fix, and let's jump into that now. So to clear that div element and to make our clear button work, it's actually very, very similar to what we did above here. So we're going to actually target, instead of my button, we're going to target the clear button. And we're going to add an event listener. Oops. keeps wanting to clear interval here, but I want to target clear. We're going to add an event listener. We're going to add click here because that is what we're listening for. And then we're again opening up another function. And all we're doing inside this function is we're going to do render to DOM. We're going to target our roll call div. And instead of actually putting something into this div element, we're going to put nothing into it. So let's go ahead and save that. And if everything worked out, our clear button should now be working. So let's try and return some random numbers and hit clear. And there it goes. So now you have a little app that you can use with your friends on game night, and you can go ahead and make the CSS as cool as you'd like. You can add in more functions if you have a multi side die or something like that, or you can add more numbers, and you can also add more die to this as well. So all right, thanks for joining and have fun.